Hello, uh, welcome to this session, and we'll focus on data analysis strategies or methods, presentation, and interpretation of data. Um, so, we'll try to explore qualitative data analysis and quantitative data analysis strategies or methods. We will also highlight how to interpret and present both qualitative and quantitative data, of course, from your analysis and interpretation. So, what is data analysis? So, any practices or processes that involve checking, sorting, cleaning, transforming, and interpreting raw data um, to discover valuable information which can be used to support learning or decision making, yeah, can qualify as data analysis. Data analysis. And data can be analyzed quantitatively. That is, if you are using only quantitative, interested in quantitative data, or if or it can be analyzed qualitatively if you are interested in qualitative research, or it can be mixed. But of course, you have to for mixed you have to analyze quantitatively alone and the qualitative alone. Then you can merge in your interpretation in your presentation. So, remind ourselves about the classification and types of data. So, quantitative data, which is numerical and it is expressed in numbers, and the it is objective and generalizable, and it is measured, can be counted or statistically aggregated, and it's a representative of broad um, groups, okay, and answers questions of what and so on, including, for instance, if you're looking at trends or labels and so on, or percentages and frequencies. And then on the other hand, you have qualitative data, which is narrative and descriptive in form of words, stories, symbols, objects, pictures, videos, audios, and so on. So it's in depth and in usually is from small groups, and it is subjective because it is focusing on individuals' perceptions, individuals' experiences, in and individuals' behaviors or beliefs. So it answers how and why questions. So let's dig deep into quantitative data analysis. And like I said earlier, any process or practice, but in this case, the practice or process is using statistics or mathematics or numerical or numbers, I mean, in terms of analysis. So any process that is statistically or numerically analyzing and interpreting data, which focuses on turning that data, which is in form of numbers, into meaningful and understandable information. And that information can be later used as findings to support learning or decision making. So to do analysis, quantitative data analysis, one can use statistical or computation strategies or methods or techniques. And the biggest question, fundamental question or basic question that one needs to ask is what calculations, tests, or interpretations do I need to use for any quantitative, for my quantitative research? Okay. So we have the process, like we've said, and the process or practices are several. So let's look into each one of them. So from the beginning, so you finished collecting your data. These are some of the things that we talked about in the previous session. You could refer to that particular session on data collection methods and so on. So after you collected your quantitative data, let's say from a survey, So you check for completeness to see if the information is complete. Check if the selected respondents were able to be interviewed. Check if the correct procedures were followed by the, let's say, research assistants or anyone who was collecting data. And then you check uh, whether selection of respondents was rightly done. And then after that, you have validated your data, you edit by checking, sorting, or cleaning errors. And errors could be, for instance, missing data errors or incorrect data or skipped questions that were not answered, or you're checking for outliers that are not within, that are beyond what you expected. And then you edit and sort that so that you have a clean data which can easily be or will be analyzed. Then you code. Of course, sometimes before you find for some questionnaires or surveys before they are distributed, they are already given codes, prior codes. But in the most conventional way, the conventional way, after editing, then data is coded, grouped, assigned, and categorized into responses and therefore entered into a software. But of course, it depends on what kind of software will be used or how it will be used or whatever tool that will be used to analyze. So, number four, after you've coded, then you try to understand your variables, get familiar with them, of course, and then you understand their measurement scales. And we have different types of variables. Of course, the main one are dependent and independent variables, but we have those other variables that will help you to understand your data. So you have nominal or categorical variables. These are with finite numbers of categories, and these cannot be rank ordered, such as sex. So in this case, one can be a male or a female, or if you want, you can consider these other categories of gender that we have in the modern. But the most, I mean, the general ones are males and male and female. So that is categorical. Or you have ordinal, which can be rank ordered, but distance between categories is not equal. So, for instance, education levels or income levels of participants. You have interval or ratio, which with identical and with equal distance between categories across the range. So you have, for instance, so intervals in terms of temperatures, 60 to 70 or 70 to 80. You have IQ test. You have age groups. You have years. Then for ratio, you have, for instance, distance ratios or area, for instance, acres and what. Then you have, for instance, dosage in terms of treatment and so on. The interval, the difference between ordinal and interval is that interval or ratio has equal distances between categories across the range, but ordinal, the categories have no equal distance. Then you have discontinuous or discrete variables. These are with uh, uh, finite numbers, such as grades or number of students. Um, yeah, I have to check this out because the finite for okay. So you have, yeah, sorry about that. So you have discontinuous, which are variables with finite numbers. So meaning that the numbering has ends. So you have grades, you have number of students, for instance, in a class. So then when you have understood your variables, you move forward to analyze and present that and interpret data, um, which depending of course on the strategy and the method you have. And there are different strategies or methods of data of quantitative data analysis. So you have, for instance, descriptive analysis, which looks at, for instance, mean, median, mode, percentages of frequencies. For instance, how many have said what on what particular category, what is the average, which means mean of your data. And so, for instance, what is the mean of the age of your respondents and so on. You have inferential analysis, which looks at correlations or regression or analysis. So, for instance, you could use this strategy if you are doing a correlation, if you have a correlation design to check for those relationships. You also have statistical tests that aim at determining whether or to reject or prove any hypothesis. And then you have statistical significance, where, for instance, you check for p-value, and p-value tests for level of confidence that the findings are genuine. So the lower the p-value, the more confident you are that the data is really genuine. Then you have, of course, quantitative data types, or the way you could analyze your variables. So you could analyze your one. You could analyze one variable, which is univariate analysis, checking, for instance, central tendencies, mean, medium or mode, or you're checking for standard deviation. So you can so these are usually statistical, descriptive statistics, and they are presented in form of graphs, for instance, showing, let's say, frequencies and so on, or tables or charts. You have also a type of analysis where you are where you're analyzing two variables to see the relationships between them. So this is bivariate analysis. So, for instance, you could look at the relationship between dependent and independent variables, and or how, for instance, they relate. And in this case, you can run t-tests or ANOVA or chi-square, and then you come up with summary tables or scatter plots that can illustrate the relationships. And also you could do a comparison analysis to compare more than two variables. For instance, where you have three variables, trivariate, or more variables, multivariate. And in this case, you can come up with ANOVA or MANOVA or chi-square or correlation or regression, which can be presented in summary tables or contingency uh, tables, or a series of scatter plots and histograms that then you can look at to compare for your interpretation. There are some softwares, of course, that you can use to do your quantitative data. For instance, SPSS, Stata, SAS, Microsoft Office, Excel can also be useful. In fact, in most you'll find that rather than entering data directly in SPSS, for instance, they can enter the data in Excel because it is more user friendly, and then they can import data in these other software packages such as SPSS. And then you also have Google Analytics and so on. Examples of data presentation. So how you can present your quantitative data, numerical tabulations or graphics and other visualizations. So you could use tables to show frequencies. You could use diagrams to show, for instance, scatter plots. You could use graphs to show, for instance, bar graphs showing percentages and so on, or age groups, or whether respondents agreed or not. You could use charts such as pie chart to show blocks of how responses were. Okay. So, other than quantitative, we have qualitative data, which looks at practices or processes of analyzing non-numeric or non-quantifiable data, which can be, for instance, in form of words or notes, observations, pictures, audio or video records, or symbols. And analysis of all these non-quantifiable data can then help you to turn these into meaningful or understandable information that can be used for further learning or decision making. And for qualitative, you can do manual or computational strategy. You can use manual or computational strategies depending on the resource that you have, or if you don't have a software, then you can do it manually, which is also okay. And of course, the fundamental question here that is asked is what kind of categorization or interpretation approach would you want to use for your data? So that particular matters. Are you looking at themes? Are you looking at content? Are you looking at whatever you want to look at? Will determine what kind of strategy or method you use. And of course, something to note is that whatever strategy you use also depends on the focus of your research or the data that you collected and what sources you got data from. So you have steps that you can follow to do your data analysis. So you have, for instance, so after again you've collected your data, let's say in form of stories, in form of interviews, in form of focus group discussion, observation, and or you have pictures that you've collected from, using picture voice method and so on. So you mark the data sources and if you are using manual analysis, you print the transcripts and materials that you use for analysis. If you're using computational analysis, you use all software, you upload the transcripts or materials in the software, and then explore and get familiar with your data. And of course, the reason is that you want to review and read to, several times to understand it, but also in the process of getting familiar, you also may want to take initial thoughts, ideas, or questions that you have at the beginning before you proceed to analyze. After that, you can create codes. This is what we call, for instance, labeling your data. And then, of course, you use deductive or inductive codes. So deductive, you can already, for instance, use codes from literature, or inductive, you get codes, you label and code generating those particular codes from the data that you have as it speaks. And you can code by highlighting key data contents that match with the codes, but also, of course, take relevant notes in the process. Um, After that, you then create themes or categories, and by creating themes, you're looking into revising or reorganizing recurring codes or opinions or beliefs into themes or sub-themes, depending on what you want to look at, depending on how you want to categorize. Okay, and then you can identify the patterns or connections that can help you answer your questions. Of course, depends on your research objectives. And then after that, you can analyze and interpret and present your data cohesively, of course, depending on the strategy and method you want to use. And during this phase, you can analyze to understand and interpret the meanings, because remember, meanings matter, because quantitative data or findings should be subjective. Then you can run also queries and visualization to get insights, but also those queries can support your meanings, for instance, or your data. For instance, you could run a word query which could give you what is the word that is mostly reflected in your data, and that could show, for instance, the significance of the significance value of that particular word in your data. Then you could also, of course, when presenting, mind about the audience, mind about the purpose, and absolutely mind about anonymity, because these are issues that we talked about earlier that relate to ethical issues. Yeah, so with qualitative data, different from quantitative data, the strategies we have are several, but we'll highlight only about six of them. So one of them is thematic analysis, which aims at analyzing your data, trying to find patterns and themes. And again, I've already talked about inductive and deductive themes. And then it's so your analysis of data is done, but presenting the information under particular themes or sub-themes that you have categorically developed. Then you have content analysis, which focuses on analyzing textual data in form of text or symbols or items or any documented data. And content analysis brings in some a little of quantitative and qualitative, because so for instance, you search for words and then you create their frequencies and patterns, and then you rely on those to create themes that belong to particular where particular frequencies and patterns and sequences belong. You have discourse analysis, which focuses on analyzing interactions and conversations within particular contexts or structures, and so it's linguistic in nature, because you're focusing on analyzing what is said and how it is said. So for instance, if you look at the conversation, is one individual, for instance, cross-legging, is one putting their for instance, hands in the pockets while they are, is someone, for instance, pointing a finger as they are trying to put across a point. So that those so whatever they say or how they say it, you can use discourse analysis to do that. Then you have narrative analysis, which has to do with analyzing how participants construct stories based on their experiences. So you are looking into life or personal stories, situations or events, and of course, while you're analyzing, you can also check for expressions, verbal expressions. You have grounded theory, grounded analysis, which of course relates to the research design grounded theory. If you want to develop a theory, for instance, so this is of course deep and detailed, and there is no definite start point. So you start from scratch, so that you can allow the data to speak for itself. And of course, as you do analysis, you're trying to establish those consistencies and differences within the data. And then following of course following your analysis, you can use the grounded theory to establish for instance propositions, of which those propositions and hypotheses can be combined to develop a theory. So you want to try to find those important events, persons, and situations within your analysis. Then you have phenomenological or phenomenology or heuristic analysis, which tries, of course, this relates to the phenomenological design, and in this case, you're trying to analyze to understand personal experiences um, uh, of a certain phenomenon. It could be a life event, it could be an experience, or it could be a situation that they have gone through. Let's say, for instance, immigrants as they move, or let's say students in class, how they experience that, or there could be an event that happened within a community, and then you want to understand how I mean, to understand people's experience to, in relation to that. So you try to focus on the depth of that experience, even looking at feelings. So there are software that you could use to do your analysis. You could use NVivo, Atlas TI, Hyper Research, uh, uh, Max QDA, and so on. There are several research to mention, but a few. Okay, so but other than the software or computerized kind of analysis, um, you can still use manuals. So for instance, for qualitative to do analysis. So, how then can we present qualitative data and that we've analyzed? So you could could be in form of words, of course, tabulations or illustrations or symbols or other visualizations. And you could use, of course, you can present in your analysis and reporting of findings. You can present direct quotes from respondents. So verbatim quotations. You could present tables, for instance, tables showing aspects such as differences or similarities, certain aspects. You could use maps such as community maps, um, or historical timelines, and so on. You could use charts and diagrams such as pictograms and so on. So, uh, that is about quantitative and qualitative data analysis. We've talked about processes, we've talked about what data is, we've talked about what data analysis is, we've talked about classifications of data into quantitative and qualitative, we've talked about strategies and methods and types of data collection, data analysis for both quantitative and qualitative. But like I said earlier, you could in your reporting combine both quantitative and qualitative. Remember, they can act as supplementary or complementary, or one can help to develop the other. So mixing them is very perfect and even more appropriate. So based on your data, you can think about your research. So and ask yourself these questions based on your data. What will your data analysis strategy be, or methods or type? How will you analyze the data and why? What tool or software would you use and why? And how do you present your data in terms of tables, in form of graphics, in terms of whatever you choose? Okay. So you have some resources here and for your use. Thank you.